Well, hi, you are.
I'm Daniel Craig with Central Kansas Foundation.
And tell me, why are you here today at this event?
Today's summit is really going to feature the great things that are going on in Salina around healthy local foods.
Why do you feel that it's important to support healthy local foods and to educate folks about it?
I think it's really important that people know the things that are available in Salina. Just the fact that we've had 2 new farmers markets open up, just a lot of the great local healthy foods that are available.
Well, hello, you are Miss Barbara LeClaire. And please tell me, or tell us a little bit about why you're here and what you're speaking about today.
I'm here today to talk about community food assessments, what they are, what groups might want to consider as they think about conducting a community food assessment, and then to point out some resources and give people some materials to work with.
I'm presenting on a local food system assessment that we conducted this past winter, and it's a result of a USDA grant that we received, a planning grant to promote local foods.
What made you, or the importance of the subject, food assessment, and applying for the grant, what really motivated this study, this whole assessment process?
Well, where I work at Kansas State University in engineering extension, we're totally grant funded, so we're always looking for grants that have a sustainability bent to it. And USDA put out this grant last summer, and I emailed it to some of the other folks in town who are also interested in sustainability, and someone picked up on it, and we decided to meet, and we got a group of people who we thought, because it was food related, and also it had a food access for low income folks aspect to it. So we also invited North Salina Community Development, Prairie Land Food Market, Kitchen for Hire, a person at Kansas State University in Salina who does a lot of community events and who's in tune with the agricultural world. And we decided what we needed to do was an assessment, and we thought about doing kind of a typical SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunity, threats. And someone suggested that I contact the Center for Engagement Community Development at K-State in Manhattan and ask if they knew of some process that we could use to assess our food system. And with no hesitation, he said, oh yes, there's this FEAST model in Oregon. And in it, we did use that model. We altered it quite a bit to fit our town and our system. So that is how it started. A group of people who, by word of mouth, asked for more expertise and came up with this model.
Good morning and welcome to the Live Well Healthy Foods Summit. My name is Daniel Craig with the Central Kansas Foundation, and I have the privilege of being the moderator for today's summit. Today's summit is being brought to you by Live Well Saline County and Salina Area Local Foods Task Force. For those of you who are from outside of Salina, welcome to Salina and welcome to the Bicentennial Center. Salina has a long history of tremendous support from our community leaders, our community organizations, and our community members for health and wellness. We also have a lot of great facilities in Salina, including the Bicentennial Center, and we're excited to be able to host today's summit here. In your packets, you'll find an agenda, you'll find bios for the presenters, you'll find information from the Kansas Rural Center, and you'll find some paper to take notes. I encourage you to take really good notes because we're going to give you a test at the end of the summit. I'm just kidding. But now that I have everyone's full attention, I would like to welcome Jeff Usher, who will be welcoming our keynote speaker. Jeff Usher is the Senior Program Officer for the Kansas Health Foundation in Wichita. Jeff is a competitive cyclist, and I'm told he's very competitive, which is probably why we get along so well. Jeff is from Salina, and I've had the privilege of working with Jeff on a number of occasions, and I can't think of a better person to introduce our keynote than Jeff. So please help me welcome Jeff Usher.
Thanks for the kind words. I never get introductions like that. Thank you. Well, I'm glad to be back to Salina. I grew up in Salina. So it's always really nice coming home. I feel like it's home, and I haven't lived here for a very long time. My dad actually was on the city commission when they voted for building this building. So that's another piece of a little trivia about me and my past. I am a competitive cyclist. You'll see me hobbling along because I tore my quadricep tendon back in May in a bicycle race. So even though it's supposed to be a healthy lifestyle, it often isn't very healthy for me, at least anyway. I may have to calm down some of my competitive nature. Well, I am here to introduce our keynote speaker. When we started planning with Daniel this convening, we started thinking we really needed someone to come in and talk about food systems in a way that can help people understand the importance of not only creating having healthier food in communities and places, but also in helping revitalize our communities across the state of Kansas. We really feel at the Kansas Health Foundation that in order to really improve the health of Kansas, we have to do something about the food environment. And so we want to do that through conversations. And through this day, hopefully we'll all understand how we can have more conversations at the local level that can impact how we feed the population in Kansas and how it can be a healthier, more thriving state for that. And when we started talking, we needed a speaker who could do it. So we've really struggled with finding keynote speakers that really kind of can get people really motivated. So I told Daniel that we would help provide the fees, pay for the fees and expenses of a keynote speaker, and I would go try to find someone out there. And so I started doing searches all over the internet, and going to the YouTubes, and guess what? I ran into Patty Cantrell doing a TED Talk in New York, and I was really impressed, so I thought, I'll call her. After talking to Daniel, I called Patty, and here she is. So I hope we haven't given too high a bar for you. So Patty, she's a researcher, writes and speaks nationally about local food as community economic development. She also offers strategic communications, facilitation, and project development through her business, Regional Food Solutions LLC. She said spent 12 years in Northwest Michigan working around regional food systems work. She's moved back to the Midwest. She's in our neighboring state of Missouri, and I think because of that understands the political environment in which we face here in Kansas, and understands how we can engage others around creating healthier communities that also can offer healthier food for our citizens. With that, I'll turn it over to Patty.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today for a lot of reasons, and yesterday, one of them, driving into Kansas from Missouri, I had a lot of great nostalgic moments because when I started kindergarten in Wichita. Went to Sunnyside Elementary because that's where my dad started off after getting out of the military. He's from Missouri. And then we moved to Colorado, and we would always head out to Colorado after visiting our family in Missouri and hit the Flint Hills about sunrise, and it's just always so cool. And let's see, what else in Kansas? Oh, I had an aunt that lived in Waukeeny, had an old ranch there, and some family who lived down in the Dodge City area, worked at a hospital there. So anyway, I've been around this state a little bit, and I love it. I love Missouri. That's why I came home to Missouri from Michigan. I had a great time there, but I'm glad to be here, and I'm very honored to come and talk with you all today. I'd like to start off with an aha moment. It involves my stepmother, Peggy, a woman who's been in my life for more than 30 years. And I've learned a lot from her, like what it's like to grow up poor in the isolated Ozarks. A few years ago, I gave Peggy a pair of sheep's wool slippers for Christmas. And I knew they were worth the $65 price tag because I'd had a pair for 20 years and they were still keeping my feet toasty. She really loved them. But then we talked later by phone, and she floored me with this. She said, "I didn't know they made shoes that keep your feet warm." That is poverty, right? But it's not a poverty of money, it's a poverty of expectations. Years after escaping poverty, Peggy was still living with a poverty mindset, with expectations that kept her closet full of shoes that didn't keep her feet warm. Expectations form our experience, our world. Now here's how this aha shoe moment gets to our food topic. Peggy's response is the same response I've seen in children's eyes when they taste a vine-ripened strawberry for the first time. Have you had this experience maybe? The astounded, joyful expression on their faces says, "I didn't know they made food that tastes that good." The fact that such a basic joy of life can be so out of reach, juice running down your arms from a fresh peach, this is a poverty of expectations. Vine-ripened tomatoes in your store, or soup in the school lunch made from a fresh squash, that's not only difficult to find, it's difficult to imagine. We have come to accept as normal, and we actually pay far too much for tomatoes that have no taste, and for aisle after aisle of processed food that doctors tell us not to eat. Our expectations of food, what we accept as normal, forms our experience, our world. What we'll be talking about today is changing food expectations. We'll be talking about a healthier, happier normal that's beginning to take shape as more people question what's not on our plates. Why not fabulously fresh fruits and vegetables in every neighborhood? Why not packaged food without the 2-inch list of synthetic ingredients? And hey, what happened to those families who used to farm around here? What happened to their blue ribbon beans and the money they used to spend at the hardware store? Can't we get some of these young people who want to farm, who make that incredible fresh baked bread, into business? These can seem like naive notions when you take in the immensity of the global food trade and the 10 for $10 competition in bread. But there is power in our changing expectations, in imagining the health and wealth we can enjoy when every child in America knows what this tastes like, what this is even. People all across the country and the world are exercising this power, and we're getting results. Altogether, rich, poor, urban, rural, conservative, liberal, we are changing our expectations, changing our experience, and changing our world. So I've been working in this field for 25 years, and I'm going to share a few things that I've learned, and I'm excited to learn from you all here today too. But right now, I'd like to take you on a journey that explains where we've been, where we are, and where we're headed in this quest for universal, healthy, tasty food. And on this journey, there are 3 main junctures. First, we encounter huge gaps and obstacles. Then we get creative. And then we get organized. It was about 13 years ago when I really began to understand how huge the gaps and obstacles are between a tree-ripened peach and most anyone's lunch in America. How the challenge of finding, affording, and even knowing what to do with healthy, tasty food is interwoven with the plight and the promise of local and regional food. I was part of a team in Northwest Michigan developing one of the country's earlier farm-to-school programs. My organization, the Michigan Land Use Institute, came to it through our work on developing new business opportunities for farmers. Global markets that our farmers had moved into had gotten tougher. Apples from China, asparagus from Peru, soybeans from Brazil. They were all pushing the prices down below what cost farmers could afford to farm for. And farmers were selling out. And that's a major concern. It was a huge concern in the region because losing farmers drains the economic and social life out of rural communities. It also drains the economic and social life out of center cities because as farmers sell out, development has moved out into their green fields. And it also, losing farmers is also a big environmental concern because farmers who love their land and take care of it with their neighbors are important for keeping our fishing and swimming holes clean. This is a day out last summer with my in-laws on the Niagara River over in Missouri. Schools, on the other hand, came to it from the front lines of the diabetes and obesity crisis. They struggle with kids acting out because they don't eat well, and the community also expects schools to model healthy eating and help kids improve their lifelong choices. But it's not like the schools didn't serve fresh fruit, it's just that those apples were not so appetizing. They tasted nothing like what you could get around Michigan at the farmer's market. sweet and juicy, and so many different varieties, all with their own different flavor. The apples that the schools got through the distributors or the Farm to School Lunch Program were usually one of only 2 varieties, red and gold delicious, and they were usually stored for a long time and transported long distances. So what if we tried to match up the apple farmers and the schools? Because where I was living in Northwest Michigan, there were apple orchards literally across the street from schools. And we learned what some of you have learned from the farmers, that this would not be so easy. Most Michigan producers load their apples at harvest time straight onto trucks, and they take them straight out of town, way out of town, to processing plants to be made into pie filling and juice and things like that. Very few farmers had any fresh apples left to sell to the schools. And all the things they would need to do that for wholesale marketing to schools, it's distribution, processing, packing, all that was gone too because they weren't selling fresh apples. How did that happen in a state that has so many fruits and vegetables? Well, over the past couple generations, Michigan had given up the fresh apple, the fresh fruit and vegetable market, to other states. Apples in particular, they gave it up to places like Eastern Washington. And because Eastern Washington has a drier climate, it has an advantage in large-scale markets because the apples aren't as prone to pests and disease, so they look good, right? You have more perfect-looking apples per acre, and they travel better. They can stand up to long-distance traveling. Michigan's humid climate makes sweeter apples, but they always don't look good because of pests and disease potentially, and they don't ship well, they're fragile. So in economic terms, Washington State has a comparative advantage, and this trade is based on this theory of comparative advantage. All over the world, countries, regions, industries, all specialize in their comparative advantage. And so in Kansas, you're very familiar with this, both the upside and the downside. Kansas has comparative advantage in the production of grains and meats and animal products. And so Kansas is big in international markets in those products and ranked 7th in ag exports in 2012. And Kansas has traded with other places for food, like apples from Washington and breakfast cereal from Michigan. And now, though, over many years, more than 90% of all the food you all spend, money you spend on food leaves the state. That's nearly $7 billion every year. And because those farmers are gone, in the meantime, Kansas has lost much of its capacity to supply those fruits and vegetables and other things, like local milk even. In 1950, 43,000 Kansas farms included orchards. Today, 441 have land in orchards. The number of vegetable-producing farms is down to 489. So I think of this as a road that's washed out. As our food traffic has moved to the global food superhighway, all of the other roads and bridges or infrastructure that might serve local and regional markets has become nearly impassable or gone entirely. All those people that might want to get into those businesses, they need that, but it's gone. And this has a direct effect on our ability to find, afford, and use healthy, tasty food. The system, this big system, loses its ability to respond to our needs and wants and our values without those local and regional avenues. Whole shipments get rejected. Waste is a really big problem because whole shipments get rejected. Apples and oranges don't look perfect. It's estimated that 1/3 of all the food produced for human consumption is lost in this system, and through our homes too. And here's one. In much of rural Kansas and Missouri where I live, you can't find any kind of fresh apple from Washington, Michigan, or Chile, because without getting into a car and driving 20 miles, the U.S. Department of Agriculture puts 58% of Kansas counties in that category. But the problem is that the rural retail infrastructure is washed out. Smaller independent stores can't match the buying power of larger chains. 60% of the market is now in the top 20 businesses. But the problem with that is not so much what their business is doing, but the fact that the system forms around it so that food distributors, trucks just pass by small communities where the rural stores can't buy the mandatory minimums or buy in large volumes. That's why we see higher prices at rural stores and lower quality too. Now that's the gaps and obstacles. But Rural stores, many are now hooking up with some kind of local supply. That stuff is growing out there, affordable, tasty, healthy food options. The latest estimate we see here from various people that are trying to gather up information on that, the latest one from 2014 comes from a private industry group and puts it at $12 billion. And I know that's small on the global food superhighway. But here's two things. One, it's growing fast. And two, more than money, it's the infrastructure we're laying down as we start getting creative to fill in the gaps and go around the obstacles. Because those supply chains in the global supermarket are big and long and anonymous, and we can start making smaller supply chains and more food is coming around. So I'm thinking about the rural grocery store manager from eastern Kansas that I met last summer at an Amish produce auction near Lamar, Missouri, just over the line. He'd hopped over to buy fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, and other produce direct from Amish and other farmers who bring their produce to sell at those venues. Produce auctions have just started coming around in recent years, and they're multiplying. They're one example of new market infrastructure. I'm also thinking about the High Plains Food Cooperative that you'll hear more about today. It links food producers and buyers in western Kansas and eastern Colorado through an online ordering system. And they've also expanded to serve schools and other things like that through wholesale markets. So the produce auction is an example of direct-to-consumer marketing. That's the first layer of infrastructure that we've started to rebuild. Farmers markets are an example of that, the one-to-one connection between farmers and consumers. They took off, that's the global food superhighway. Farmers markets have grown like crazy. We're now up to 8,300 in the country. Kansas went from 27 markets in the late 80s to about 130 today. That's up 500%. Another creative and important innovation in this direct-to-consumer layer is community-supported agriculture, or CSA. That's where farmers and consumers, they buy a share up front. You may be familiar with this, of the farmer's product, and then get boxes of produce and other items through the year that one or more farmers may put together. But it's grown beyond farmers and consumers. Now, employers are doing CSA programs as a wellness option for their employees, and that's new business for farmers. We have hospitals and insurance companies getting together to offer CSA as a prescription for people getting out of the hospital. Hospitals also now qualify for tax credits under the Affordable Care Act when they do things like CSA to help build health through building more local and regional food and farm connections. This one-on-one direct-to-consumer layer and many other ways farmers and consumers are getting together, like online sales or farm stands, they've grown to a mainstream marketing avenue for farmers. The USDA has been tracking it, started to track it recently. The Farm Credit Council recently analyzed the numbers. And what they found was this: if direct-to-consumer were a commodity like cattle and grain, it would be the 4th largest in the nation by the number of farms involved. It's grown that much. So the next layer is where we see local food going to larger wholesale markets like schools, hospitals, and grocery stores. Regional food hubs are a new type of enterprise growing in this space. They're filling the big gaps in the infrastructure we need to make farm-to-table happen, farm-to-table wholesale happen. Food hubs pull together, we're up to about 300 now. Most of them have come about in the last 5 years. What food hubs do is pull local supply together. That is, they aggregate product from farmers. And then they market and distribute it to these wholesale buyers and consumers. Source identified here is the type of food they deal in. And source identified is another way of saying you're making sure consumers know where food comes from, how it's produced, and that their dollars are helping farmers fuel communities with local commerce and keep fishing and swimming holes clean. But food hubs are just one part of a much larger picture. In this regional farm-to-tail wholesale model, we see many different players getting together, getting creative and getting collaborative. Producers, all the way from producers through processors, distributors, and buyers like retailers, are sitting down together to talk about how to do this and what they need to do it cost-effectively. Because remember, that infrastructure is largely gone. This is not easy. Support players are also involved, like my organization back in Michigan, and more economic development agencies. They're providing education, technical assistance, financing, and they're facilitating business connections between entrepreneurs so they can make deals and make this happen. This lineup of players is called a value chain. They're made of people, businesses, and organizations with shared values around what they want to accomplish, and they build relationships that make it work. So here's an example from North Carolina. The regional family-owned Lowe's food store grocery chain, it's all around the state. They're locally based, they care about the community, but they also have a self-interest. They know that offering local foods is going to help them stand out from the competition. So they're motivated. One of the things they are doing now is they have a full-time person that goes around the state talking to farmers, food hubs, to talk about what products they have coming up, what they need, what Lowe's needs, and then they start planning for the next season. Not only that, the farmers, food hubs, and Lowe's are sitting down with university researchers, and they're talking about something called cross-docking. And that's all about lowering the overhead costs, which cuts into everybody's pocket. So with cross-docking, farmers and food hubs can bring their product to an MDI warehouse, but instead of mixing their local product in with all those products that MDI handles, they load the local product straight onto trucks at the warehouse that are bound for different grocery stores. Now what that does, it helps retain the source identity that can get diluted if it gets mixed in with all of MDI's products. And it reduces the markup on local foods because MDI doesn't have to charge much for handling. That's good for consumers and farmers. This is creative. And that's where those 300 food hubs and direct market farmers all around the country are doing deals like this, are looking at how to make it more affordable, how to get that food flowing, how to make it affordable for the consumer and the farmer. It's not easy, but those relationships are coming together. And that's new infrastructure. Another layer we haven't talked about, this is again that layer, and I've mentioned source identified supply. Grown locally, that's one of the food hubs in Iowa. And again, a lot of them are branded. They're branding their food because it has a source identity to it and that matters in the market. And again, those players keep that source identity together. Farmers are not costs in the system, they're partners. Making sure farmers make money is part of what they're up to. But I want to go also back to the home and neighborhood level. Because I had this little circle home here, and you're like, what's going on down there? There's a lot going on down there. There's important, essential infrastructure growing that is working on community and economic development opportunities. So I have one urban and one rural example for you. The urban example involves community gardens. They're growing like crazy, maybe here in Kansas too, you know, down the street, at churches, at workplaces across America. The thing to remember about community gardens is not the quantity of food produced, it's the food expectations that community gardens change, the relationships they build, the neighborhood capacity and empowerment that grows there. These are building blocks for healthy choices. This is social capital. This is community infrastructure. My example is close to home in Springfield, Missouri, a city of 360,000 in the southwest part of the state. It's Missouri that way, I keep pointing. Springfield Community Gardens is a bootstrap organization that started about 4 years ago with one garden in the Grant Beach neighborhood. And it's a very low income, high crime area, low on food, just convenience stores. 2 little grocery stores finally gave up the ghost last year, so it qualifies now as a food desert. A key thing about Grant Beach Gardens is that it is resident owned and operated. That is, even though a college student helped start the garden, it's the neighbors who run it, particularly one Vietnam vet with a green thumb who really makes things happen. And there are many stories about kids tasting their first homegrown strawberry, about police calls going down in that part of town consistently, quarter after quarter, changes in zoning to make community gardening easier, including selling from the community gardens, and now how other neighborhoods are asking Grant Beach Garden to help them. So other residents are starting gardens, 18 different gardens, resident-led gardens, and now a network around the city. But even more than that, the story I want to tell about Springfield Community Gardens is how they're helping the regional food bank and the city county health department do their job on healthy food. Grant Beach Garden heard about the fact that the food bank, Ozark Food Harvest, was having a hard time getting fresh food. They're trying to get more fresh food into the system, fruits and vegetables. They couldn't really work through a lot of these local small food pantries because they didn't have enough people or processes to handle perishables. Grant Beach Garden said, hey, we need the food and we've got some capacity. So they quickly ordered a weekly food distribution that's now in its second year. Weekly, 350 families and thousands of pounds of produce right on the street in Grant Beach neighborhood. There's no income qualifying paperwork, no limits on who can show up. The deal is that participants become Grant Beach Garden members for $1 a year and 2 hours of volunteer work every month. This is not standing in line for a food handout. These neighbors become co-owners and co-operators. They're eager for the produce and they eagerly contribute their hours and their energy. They help unload the trucks and they set up the little garage that's like a store. They designed a lottery lineup system so that nobody has to wait in line and figure out and try to get there first. They take care of each other. One day, a few women quietly stepped up and started bagging produce that people were exiting as they were exiting the garage. Without saying a word, they put a stop to a few people taking more than their share. These low-income residents are discovering new tastes, changing their diets, improving their health. They're changing their expectations, their picture of what they and their neighborhood can do. This is social capital, this is community infrastructure. And the city and county health department is supportive. This infrastructure is helping them reach the high-need people they're trying to get to with cooking classes and things like that. My rural example comes from Ozark County in south central Missouri, poorest in the state. Very rural. A young mother and librarian there, her name is Rachel Reynolds Lester. She was tired of driving all over the creation to get fresh food from farmers she knew with chickens, pigs, and gardens. She knew a lot of people were doing that too because there weren't a lot of grocery options in their rural area and those were limited. And she also knew many people couldn't afford to do this but wanted those options. So she put out a call to friends and neighbors and a notice in the newspaper for a meeting on the idea of starting a cooperative where producers and consumers would both be members. 30 people packed Jugbuck's Coffee House, and after a couple years of working it out, the Oregon County Food Producers and Artisans Co-op opened with 20 members. And they have a location in an old donut shop on the square in Alton, Missouri. Here's how it works. Membership is $10 a month or $100 a year. You can pay in cash, or you can also pay in part or totally in products and time. One guy pays his entire membership in eggs. Today, 2 years later, the co-op has 128 members. About 25 are food producers. They bring their produce, meat, eggs, baked goods, and they get 70% of the sales price they set. 30% goes to the co-op for utilities and things. Last year, those producers took home $27,000. It's a big income addition in a county with few jobs and low-paying jobs. Rachel explained the logic behind the project in a magazine interview. She said, people should not have to drive 40 miles to buy crummy lettuce when they can get fresh organic lettuce from their neighbors. And it doesn't stop with the co-op, of course, because the group has now grown. They've started a Pay What You Can cafe where some of their members cook and make money doing it. They've started a farmer's market in a nearby town. They maintain gardens at the nursing home. The youth have started movies on the square, and now a larger building next door is in the works. This is community building health and wealth with food system infrastructure. Now, all of these examples are inspiring, but what makes them transformative? What change does any of this present beyond some niche markets and a few pockets of hope? My answer is an image that keeps running through my head, an image of grass growing up through concrete. I don't have that image today, but maybe you can imagine. It looks impossible, but it keeps growing. As in nature, the life force within us keeps pushing us to health, to building healthy people and places, to start connecting our green shoots. We're now at the third juncture on our food system journey today. This is when our efforts begin to intersect, when we expand together. This is when transformation begins. Across the country, at all levels, state, local, regional, national, we're getting organized. Back in my old home base of Northwest Michigan, Farm to school did take off, especially when kids that were presented with local apples ate 5 times as many. And more kids started eating school lunch, which brought more money into the schools. Things have grown since that time, including a new food hub in the area, new financing programs for farmers. Even Goodwill Industries has started something called Farm to Freezer. They're doing a training program by flash freezing local fruits and vegetables and selling them to schools and retail. But really, as far as getting organized, all this stuff really started revving up about 6 years ago when we decided to hitch our horses together behind one common goal: 20% local by 2020. Now, individuals, businesses, and organizations across the 10 counties are working and playing together in this local food space under the banner of the Northwest Michigan Food and Farming Network. And I have something I'm going to leave up here today. It's a report to the community from the Northwest Michigan Food and Farming Network. It mentions 48 different projects and has a huge list of partners. And it really is possible to do this. I know Michigan has a lot more fruits and vegetables, but a lot of those things are transferable, like the financing program that has come out of this, because in the region we have, up in Northwest Michigan, an economic development goal, and keeping farmers and businesses part of it. So that's why the Chamber of Commerce, local banks, and the Small Business Center are all working on farm business classes and coming together to do something that's really challenging. Because these smaller businesses, and especially with these new business models, they're pretty challenging for bankers to lend to. Mostly because it costs a lot of money to just do all the due diligence of finding out what's going on. So bankers are sitting down together with the Chamber of Commerce and all those people I mentioned monthly to figure out, as farmers come to them with things they want to finance, they're looking at it together. They're sharing notes and sharing understanding of what needs to happen and putting their money together to make it happen. They put out several $1 million over the last years across several counties, and dozens of jobs have been created. And it's a commitment from the region. They're tracking that there. And that's what can happen everywhere because people are getting organized. It happens with schools, agencies, and churches all working together on related efforts and combining their notes, such as improving the healthfulness of vending options at schools and events. Those are things that we can accomplish together. Collaboration and synergy also happens when we do meet and greets, for example, between buyers and sellers. Hospitals get to know what the farmers have to offer. Farmers learn what the hospitals need on pack sizes. Healthy food advisory groups like yours and regional networks and more than 200 food policy councils around the country are keeping this going and growing. One of them in northern Colorado, it's called the Northern Colorado Food Cluster, is, I think, an indicator of how committed the range of partners is and how valuable they believe it is to get organized together. The Northern Colorado Food Cluster has a budget and a paid coordinator now because the people involved, whether students, chefs, food processors, restaurants, farmers, local governments, they all pay a membership or a sponsorship from $50 to $5,000. And they're moving forward on building value chains and building programs and changing policy. And then all these local and regional efforts get organized nationally and even globally. The National Farm to School Network you might be familiar with, they are part of 40,000 schools now being involved in Farm to School from just a handful a few years ago when we got started. And they're reaching 23 million students. And what they do is connect across regions, share stories, share examples like best practices. How do you put out a bid to local farms without using the same old paperwork that's only designed for the big distributors? So new bidding processes have developed because people are putting their notes together. Another cross-country association is the National Good Food Network. This group focuses on the wholesale side of things, food hubs and their developers. National Good Food Network conferences are like a cross between Silicon Valley and Organic Valley. You've got internet entrepreneurs coming together to do internet tracking systems for food hubs. You have food bank officials and farmers and hospital administrators sitting down together to talk about logistics. There's very active places there. And when we get it organized, more innovation and more support follows. Back in Northwest Michigan, they started a program called 10 cents a meal. It's all about putting community money behind helping schools buy more fresh fruits and vegetables. Schools typically only have about 20 to 30 cents to spend on fruits and vegetables, and this program puts an extra dime in there. Last year, 3 districts put $85,000 more into the local economy with 17 different farms and 27 different fruits and vegetables. A Michigan legislature is now trying to expand that statewide and follow the model of Oregon that has a statewide program like this. Because of this 10 cents a meal in Northwest Michigan, they were able last year to start serving very delicate, fresh, tree-ripened peaches. Kids going through the lunch line didn't know what they were, despite all the farm-to-school work there. But now they know, because of what's going on there, that farmers nearby can produce something that tastes that good. So on this journey, we've seen the big gaps and obstacles that happen when our foods goes out to the global food superhighway and we lose those local and regional connections. We've also seen the creativity and innovation in filling those gaps, local, regional, and back at the home and neighborhood level. And we've seen how getting together across regions in the nation is really becoming a national and even a global movement. We're exercising the power that our changing food expectations build, and we're getting results. The fact is, not having local food and farm commerce, not having an infrastructure that can make that happen, that's impoverishing. Distribution trucks full of food passing by rural communities, center cities crumbling because development has marched into farmers' green fields, little girls like my stepmother Peggy, who never learns that food can taste that good or that shoes can keep your feet warm. When we accept this as normal, we create a poverty of expectations, a poverty of expectations that forms our experience, our world. Through the love of good food and farming, we're changing our expectations. We're exercising our power. We're getting results. I believe the spirit that moves us now is much like the framers of the Constitution. They put colonial America on a new path, a new normal, by declaring the pursuit of happiness an unalienable right. We're making a similar declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that in order to maintain our God-given right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all people must have access to healthy food and the means of producing it in a way that nourishes our communities, strengthens local commerce, and works in harmony with nature and neighbors. Thank you very much.
Well, hello, Ms. Phil Klima. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you for coming today. We really appreciate the Access TV being here at the Healthy Food Summit.
Well, tell me, what specifically motivated you to be involved with the Healthy Food Summit, and why is it important to Salina?
I think food has always been really important to me. Historically, I have been an entrepreneur with bed and breakfast and fine dining restaurants, and been involved in growing food as a child on a farm. And I think when I see the disconnect between our children and their food source, it really concerns me that they don't understand that carrots come from the ground and that chickens lay eggs. And I think we need to respect our farmers and our food source more. And when I hear the national stats that 90% of the food that we buy in Kansas comes from outside the state of Kansas, that concerns me because that's a huge economic impact leaving our state. And we certainly need to retain more of that wealth rather than have it exit our state.
Well, tell us why you're here.
I'm here because I feel that healthy eating and healthy foods surrounding local communities and stuff is very important. And it's not only important for individuals, it's important for communities to really kind of get local dollars spent in local communities. So, I mean, just helping each other out and just kind of having that win-win situation.
Carol, tell us why you're here.
Well, I was raised on the farm, so I have an interest in food and food production, and I garden and I like fresh food. I'm a part of the Local Foods Task Force, and so when I saw that this was available, I was hoping that I could make time to come. It's such a huge issue because I think the statistics are just crazy. Like, Kansas is an ag state, and over 90% of what we grow here leaves the state, and I think it's over 90% of what we eat here is imported. That seems crazy to me. It seems like we should be able to figure out a system so that the local farmers could grow things. And I know some of our things can't be grown year-round, but you'd think that we could get farmers to grow things, but then you have to distribute, process, market. Stores, schools, they need to be willing to use or sell the produce. So it's a massive undertaking, really. And I think that it's going to begin with Saline County forming a food policy or a food advisory board, they're calling it, so that we can have a group of people that are coordinating and putting this all together and trying to get this lumber train moving forward.
Well, hello, Merritt Blanchard. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, tell me what brings you here today.
Well, I tell you what, I got an invitation from Living Well, Saline County, talking about all the different food advocacy and living well and healthy discussions they'd be having today, and I thought as a local leader, I might be well to learn a little bit more about what the topics they're talking about and what they're learning, and just try to help out in whatever way I could in promoting healthy living and healthy food and so on through the different policies that we try to enact through zoning and different parts of the city. So the more I know, the better.
What have you learned so far in the sessions with the main speaker and the breakout session that's really impacted you so far?
Well, what I've liked, I think, and I don't know that it's learned so much that I didn't know anything at all before, but it's kind of reinforced and built some of the ideas that through food advocacy policy boards and awareness, that things like healthy local foods can not only add to and enrich young people's life through school and their school lunches and having local food that way, but also it could provide opportunities for local growers and farmers to sell their produce locally and perhaps even help some of the local markets and provide jobs, probably not on a large scale, but starting slow at least, providing some.
Well, hello. You are Tom Mertz.
Yes.
Tell me, why are you here?
Well, I've been interested in local food production and distribution for a while. I used to live in Pennsylvania, and in the summer I would just drive outside of town and go to the farm and buy vegetables and fruits, and usually some of the farmers also made pies and that kind of thing. So I was kind of used to that, and then moving back here, I got married and moved back here, and my wife is interested also in the local food production, and she also has started gardening, and she's gotten gardening, and she runs the children's garden at the local emergency food bank. So we just have together gotten interested in this whole idea, and this just seemed a way to learn more about it.
When the keynote speaker spoke, what were some things that you took away from that really kind of surprised you or maybe impacted you a little bit?
Well, most everything, because I'm a newbie, so I didn't know what a food hub was, and so I learned about that, and the fact that I think what surprised me the most was the fact that there's so much of it going on, because just like after the first breakout session I sat into was the food hub, and there's a huge food hub out in western Kansas that markets to the Front Range area in Colorado, and I didn't even know anything about it. And so the fact that all these things are out there and going, and that was surprising. I had always thought of this as kind of a new thing.
Well, hello, Miss Patty. Is it Cantrell?
Patty Cantrell.
Cantrell.
That's how we say it.
Cantrell.
Cantrell.
Cantrell. I can say that because I'm from Missouri. But you are the guest speaker today. And tell me what impacts you the most. Like, why is this so important for citizens locally and in our community and all over?
Well, I think it's important to just reimagine what's possible, because so much is happening around healthy food. Not just healthy food, but new businesses for farmers, more businesses for retailers that are serving stuff that people want to eat. We've just gotten used to how things are, and now we're putting some new things in the system, and people are responding. So whether it's a kid having a fresh peach or apple on the lunch line, they'll eat that. And the same with people going out to lunch, fresh made soup. And I know the business of that can be hard, but making those options possible, it's starting to happen, and just knowing that that's possible can get it going.
What kind of results have you seen from local communities like Salina or Saline County where they've really taken hold of this initiative? Have you seen that as far as the impact, the positive impacts that it's had?
Yeah, one example, it's a rural area in Wisconsin, and to preface that, what I want to say is people in local government and economic development seeing this as an opportunity to grow businesses, but also attract people to their community, because being a place where people want to be is an economic development strategy. And so in central Wisconsin, they had a building that was empty because a company moved out. But they had quite a few of these little businesses starting around local food. So they've made that a local food business center. And it's some of them that were growing now have access to docks, so that some things that they needed but couldn't afford to build themselves. And now those farms and food businesses are working together. They're sharing information about certain buyers, and so there's a lot of synergy that happens. So that's the type of thing that communities can do when they recognize this as an opportunity.
Hi, Leon. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Tell me, why are you here?
I'm a presenter for the High Plains Food Co-op and also moderator for the Food Hub session. This Food Hub and Food Summit is really about telling people, encouraging people to consider local food.
Why, in your personal opinion, why is supporting local food so very important?
Our health and supporting our local producers and supporting our local communities. It's all about local.
Very good. Now tell me, in seminars like this, I kind of liken it to planting a seed. What do you think people can really expect as far as the impact of the information that they received today?
Ultimately, to change the economy. We want to change our food system globally, locally, and regionally. But planting the seed today, we need to fertilize it and provide some sunshine and water that seed. Buy local food, support your local producers, support the local system that supports local producers. We can have a better local food system, better economy.
Hi, please tell us why you're here.
Well, I'm Jeff Usher. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Kansas Health Foundation. And we believe that all people in Kansas should have access to healthy food. We think it's incredibly important for that to happen. So we've been funding communities across the state to wrestle with this issue around how can everybody have equal access to healthy food. As Patty may have mentioned, there's a lot of food deserts across the state of Kansas and in communities like Salina. And we really truly believe that in order to really create healthier environments for all Kansans, we need to wrestle with the notion of how we can access healthy food that's easily accessed locally with fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, locally grown meats and produce. And we know that will only happen if we can gather the people, the stakeholders that really can make that happen. And so a lot of the people here that we're talking about food hubs, we're talking about food councils, we're talking about food systems assessments. All those tools that allows us to engage with the stakeholders in the community that can look at what are the issues at the local level that can help us feed our children, feed our elderly, and feed those who do not have access to healthy food. I'm sure you and I here you in Salina and me in Wichita, it's easy for us to get access to healthy food, but it just doesn't happen in many places, both in urban food deserts as well as rural communities that don't even have local grocery stores.
What kind of an impact can you foresee that summits like this and making awareness in the communities and in this county can have?
Well, we've seen it. We've encouraged the healthy communities, which Salina is one of our healthy communities, to bring in and gather people to have the conversation. So we bring in people that can tell the story about how it can be successful. So we have people that are actually have experienced it, and people in Kansas that are actually doing it. The idea, oftentimes people don't believe it can be done. How could, producers say I can't produce enough. Distributors say there isn't a guaranteed amount of produce that'll come to my store or my restaurant that I know that I'll continually have. And so that's bringing people together, understanding the story, encouraging people to talk to other people that are not necessarily part of the. I mean, I'm with the Health Foundation, of course. A lot of people think, okay, then why aren't you working with public health officials, doctors? Well, we do work with those folks, but we have to work with the entire community. We have to, because it's the entire community that's going to make a healthier community. And so having people understand that, and so we encourage our healthy communities to engage cross-sectoral leaderships, teams to really have this conversation. And it really comes down to, in the end, it's always challenging, it's always hard, really hard work. But in the end, something good comes of it, especially if you start working together with the various sectors who want the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello, Mr. Dave Smith. Tell us, why are you here?
Well, I'm interested in healthy food, healthy eating. I think that's what you're doing and promoting.
Tell me, what kind of an impact do you foresee for Saline County with seminars like this, where it's educating people about local foods?
Well, there's a great need. There's a lot of unhealthiness in our diets for years and years and years. So I hope people will learn and do what's needed to do for good health.
Are there any anything else you'd like to share with us about the summit today? Do you think this is a good thing for Salina and Saline County?
It is a good thing, yes. I hope a lot of people will take advantage of it.